Welcome to the Making a Statement podcast. I'm Tori VanCura-Rutland, the Chief Growth Officer with HC3 and your podcast host. So for our sixth episode, we're focusing on tax preparation for banks and credit unions. And while it may seem kind of early to start talking about that in September, our guests today have some insights on why now is a good time to think about your end-of-year tax processes. So I'm excited to introduce our Chief Operations Officer, Gerald Pettway, who's been on the podcast before. So thank you, Gerald, and welcome back.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me.
And our Director of Client Experience, Mary Virginia Gardner. So welcome.
Thanks.
So guys, you both touch our clients through operations and experience, but I'd like for our listeners, if they haven't met with you personally, just to hear a little bit about who you are, your background with HC3, and I'll start with Gerald, and we'll go over to MV.
So thanks, Tori. Yes, I'm Gerald Pettway. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. I've been with HC3 for about 4.5 years now. So in this role, I handle all of our day-to-day operations. It encompasses our data induction process. So that's our data composition team. That is actually getting our customers' data, processing that data, and actually putting it on a statement or preparing it for electronic delivery. The process integration team, which is an internal team that handles process improvement and helping modify some of our older legacy systems into some of our newer workflow processes. And then our production team, which actually prints, inserts, and mails the customer documents out.
Thank you.
I'm Mary Virginia, also known as MV Gardner. And as the Director of Client Experience, I was brought on to be a bridge between the sales process and the account management team. We just felt like we needed a deeper level of understanding of our clients, kind of at a more strategic level rather than a tactical level to understand their business. So I've been leading that team for a little over 2 years now.
Thank you, guys. So just before we get into some, hot tax topics, wanted to throw a couple questions. It's also, we're, for us, talking about taxes and prepping for end of the year, but it's also back to school. And so one thing we just wanted to ask is, are there any back to school rituals or things that you guys have within your family, whether your kids are still with you or grown?
Well, for me, all of my kids are out of the house. So my back to school ritual has changed over the last few years. Previously, I think like a lot of people, it was, get school supplies and that nice little picture that you take on the first day of school. But being an empty nester now, the only thing I worry about is the traffic increasing. So I'm not really worried about the whole back to school process anymore.
Nice. All right.
Well, thanks. I've got one in college and one in high school. So it has changed a little bit over the years, but I do enjoy taking the obligatory first day of school photo at the front door. I can do that for my son. And then my daughter has been sweet enough to have a roommate take her picture holding up a sign this year. She is first day of 16th grade.
I love it.
So that's been fun. I also completely nerd out on the school open house in the first week of school. So this was my last year to do that.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Well, mine is not in school yet. So I've like the traffic increase is something that I have to adjust, but also, and since I've been running in the morning, darting around the school bus sometimes, which is dangerous, but it's a new obstacle in my neighborhood. I'm like, oh yeah, it's that time. So, all right, well, I've asked this to Gerald, so I'm going to start with you, MB. But, we are, a statement provider. So I have to ask, for your bank statements, do you get a printed or digital statement?
I do both. At the phase I am in my life, I have about 6 checking accounts. So that is all digital. There's a lot of moving around with those. But for like investment and savings accounts, that kind of thing, I do paper. It's more of a, out of sight, out of mind. So I need to keep those in hand. Plus, I like to see what other institutions are doing in terms of their print and their messaging and what they're doing to better serve their customers. So that's a good way to see that for myself.
And I'll throw this to both of you, since again we are a statement company. So what's sort of the most valuable thing you get out of your statements when you do look at them? What job does it serve for you?
Well, I'll speak and say, I kind of came up in a generation where people check their accounts more often online than actually use their statements. But I also have business accounts that allow me to, reconcile. You have a lot of transactions, probably a lot more transactions with business accounts than you do with your personal accounts. And so you still need the ability to sit down and reconcile that information on a monthly basis. And there's really nothing like having that piece of paper, that document that you can have to assist with that process. Additionally, if you have other pieces of information on there that kind of show trends, that's very helpful for you to be able to see. And so some statements will give you trends of in specific categories of what you're spending. And so it's always helpful to be able to know what you're doing with your money. Sometimes you have a perception that you're doing something. When you actually see it on that statement, then you realize, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know I was actually doing that. And so that's kind of the benefit of the statement to me.
Yeah, I would second that. I think kind of looking for anomalies and helping to see how, your budget might need adjusting for certain things is really helpful. That's mostly what I use my statements for.
I think, Jared, like I definitely grew up with, online banking. Like my mom showed me how to do a check register, but as soon as online banking was available and I was a college student, I was checking things and checking that as often as I could. But what it didn't teach me right away was really that there wasn't a summary. So when I did start looking at, a statement, I started to see those trends, and that was very educational. I think now there's more technology in statements and more technology in online banking, so you see more. But I know that I had a couple fun life lessons there on how much I was spending on coffee as a college student and why I was always broke. I couldn't reconcile that. So all right, well, thank you both, and let's kind of get into our topic today. So timing is really a huge factor, I've learned, in tax preparation in that process. So for each of you, so when do you suggest that FIs start this process and why?
I'll go first. I think the best time to start preparing for tax season is right after the last tax season is over, when anything that went well or didn't go well can be reviewed and kind of noted for the year ahead. Of course, we're mid-cycle now, so that's not very helpful. But I think the next best time is to do that when you're prior to your annual budget planning, because the tax notices are such a big expense. It's a good time to kind of review, how things went, what kind of budgeting you may need to look at, and consider any postage increases that have happened throughout the year, because those are going on. But kind of get your ducks in a row so that you can avoid anxiety during the rush.
I will absolutely echo the sentiment that MV made. I think the best time is immediately after the previous tax season. I think we do have a lot of customers who will wait until about now to start saying, okay, hey, I really want to focus on taxes. And you're already really a little bit behind the curve here. You want to address, much like MV said, let's look at the challenges that we had the previous year and talk about how can we correct those things. And so one of the key things to do is really identify your tax team. I think that's something some of our customers don't do is, hey, identify who are the people that are going to lead our tax effort, and then get that group together to kind of set a timeline for what you want to get accomplished, when, what are the deadlines for what we need to get accomplished, kind of understand what can we control, what can't we control, and then who are all the people that need to be included. And that should also include conversations with your core provider as well as your document vendor.
So that sounds like a lot of heavy planning and deep conversation. And there's a lot going into this. And I see the point. Like, you can't start 3 or 4 months before, because there's a lot of conversations with core vendors internally. And I like your comment, Gerald, about timelining things, lining up everything. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the more we can assist, for us as a document vendor, we are right now waiting for the Pub 1220, which is the document that the IRS puts out to tell us what are the changes that are going to occur to the tax documents. And so while our customers won't have that information, the documents that you're going to have to put out. Now, there will always be some minor changes to the documents that we have to send out, but it helps you still by creating that team, set a plan in action. And so just because you have this tax team, there may be other departments or entities within the bank that they need to work with. It gives you kind of a timeline to get with those people and say, hey, we're going to need X information from you by this date, so that we can then have conversations with the vendor, coordinate a call if possible with the vendor, the bank, as well as the document provider, which is HC3, hopefully. And then you eliminate really some of the risks that go along with, data changes and who's responsible for what, and how do we test this ahead of actual go live, which is January.
Perfect. And I like that you said, how do we test this? Because it's always good to go ahead and test everything before you have to run something that's got a hard deliverable date to your customers.
Correct.
So MV, we touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the common challenges you see our clients facing as they go through tax preparation?
Well, we hit on a couple, which is when to start, where to start, how do I know what to begin with? And our account management team can help a lot with that, or whomever you use. Mm-hmm. I think another thing is the alternate address file, which can be a challenge. Often the address of your customer is different in the IRS file than it is in your records. So having a plan to address that and discussing that before you get into January and have any difficulty.
Yep.
And Gerald, I know we've touched on, again, a couple operational pieces, but is there anything else, any other operational guidance you have for our clients as they are entering this heavier season of tax preparation?
Yeah, well, I think along with, kind of understanding some of the challenges that MV just discussed, the other one is going to be time. And so, we have to really all remember tax documents have to be mailed by January 31st. And generally, a lot of customers may not have all of that data compiled until January 10th, sometimes January 15th. If the steps that have previously been discussed, like MV was discussing, if these changes have not been identified until that time, now you're trying to make these changes kind of on the fly, and with this looming January 1 deadline. So I would say the first biggest challenge that any customer is going to have is just the mere fact of time. We have a very small window to get all of this stuff out the door. And so if we can make sure that, data mappings, any changes from the IRS and the core and the document vendor have all been coordinated that we all understand when we say co-packaging, when we say householding, that we're all speaking the same terminology. I think those things will definitely help move the process forward and eliminate a lot of headaches. And I think the second part of that is accounting for change. We know there's always going to be some minor change to the documents. And so they may appear similar, but they're going to be minor changes. If we've had the opportunity ahead of time to actually prepare and test, program for all of that, then it makes that January 1 to January 31 period a lot less stressful.
I'm taking notes. It sounds like you need a really deep project plan, but that's great. So what are some things that maybe we're doing to help, clients that are leveraging HC3 for tax services?
Well, operationally, I think the biggest one is rolling out the TNS solution, our tax notice solution, to all of our customers. And so that is a solution that really answers all of the tax questions. It can provide exactly what every customer needs. Much like we've discussed earlier, immediately after the tax season, we put a team together and talked about how can we improve tax notice solution to address questions and concerns that our customers have from this previous tax season. So we are better prepared now to address those concerns. Secondly, what we do is, we kind of staff up. We get, extra supplies so that we are better prepared to deal with the influx of data that we're going to have to process and documents that we're going to have to put out the door. So I think there are a lot of steps that we are taking. And then I think the third and probably most important one is we work directly with some of the cores once the Pub 1220 is released, so that we're kind of internally already testing with tax notice solution to say, hey, these are the changes that the IRS has mandated. If you and the core are already making these changes on your side, we're going to make them in the TNS solution. And then when we get the data from the customers, it should be a pretty seamless process. We don't have the ability to do that with every single core, but we are working hard to try to establish those relationships.
That's great. And that's very forward thinking. The idea is to take some of that, the reactiveness of the tax season, right? There's always data changes. Then they have to compile all of the data. So again, it goes back to planning and making it, as easy for banks and credit unions to get that data to us and to get it processed.
Right.
So,
go ahead.
Well,
I was just going to add that it's the TNS platform is a single location to handle all of those things that are involved with getting your tax notices out. Everything from data receipt to proofing to selecting a cycle for when you can have your data and when it will go out. That's just so convenient, and it's a much better solution. And our clients have enjoyed that so far.
That's great. I like that point too of choosing a cycle date. Because I think that's a big fear, right? Of I'm getting my data to you. When is it gonna drop? Is it gonna that is the fear. We have deadlines to get these documents out. Are you going to meet them? And can I dictate anything, right, as the client? So that's very helpful.
Right. And I think Gerald mentioned it a minute ago, but we also have the ability to do test runs with prior year's data, just to give it a sample, make sure you've got everything squared away and there's nothing you have missed in the process.
Exactly. Yeah. So very, very beneficial. The cycle dates, very important. It gives us the opportunity to kind of manage workloads, as well as give customers kind of some level of confidence that if I deliver this data to you by this date, it's going to go out the door on this date. And so we always try to encourage as many customers as possible. The earlier the cycle date, the sooner the documents will go out the door and you don't start to creep up on that January 31 deadline.
One thing I would add to that too is that we have to have all of the data files in order to meet that. Right, Gerald?
Correct. Yes, it's a very important point. Thank you for bringing that up. So being sure that we have all of the data. So some small portion of it is not very helpful.
Right. So it sounds like banks need to treat this like a true annual project and start planning immediately after the previous tax season, and really talk to core and document provider and internal teams and mapping out timelines, and dependencies. There seems like there's a lot of dependencies on data, on pulling their own, data fields and components, looking at last year's, and making sure that they have a partner, whether it's the core or a provider like HC3 that's easy to work with on practicing, right? Testing things out so you feel like you know how things are going to go when you drop that full data file. So it kind of, to bring it home, what have we learned, HC3? What have we learned from some of the past years that has maybe helped us better identify what bankers and credit unions are going through?
Well, operationally, I think we've learned that we previously were not as dialed into understanding the changes from the publication 1220. That wasn't a process that we were previously kind of taking on. We would say, "Hey, we'll get the data, and then we will actually make our changes there." Now we're going out, we're reviewing the publication and saying, "Okay, we know these changes are coming. Let's go ahead and update our solution so that we are better prepared." Two, I think we have put more people internally available. Our account management team has become more involved in the tax process so that we can provide better support and response to our customers to say, okay, hey, instead of us having a very small group of individuals who will respond to your needs, your questions, and your concerns, we're going to kind of have this larger group. We're going to have individuals that you're already accustomed to working with, that you've developed these relationships with, available to answer questions. And so in that process, we've had to kind of educate that team more about our tax process. And then operationally, again, we've added additional hardware and programmers to help be prepared for January, which for a document provider like ourselves is the busiest time of year.
Yeah. And from a client experience perspective, just having TNS, like I said, with one place to go for all of your needs and where places you can check on a status, that's great. And additionally, just keeping up with year to year, we could keep up with things that went well or didn't go well with our clients, to remind them, hey, this was an issue last year. Let's make sure we're addressing it ahead of time this year, so that we're all prepared and it can go smoothly, because it's a stressful time. We know that we hate seeing that, and we just want to be more proactive and more helpful in getting it all done.
Thank you guys. I feel like I've connected some dots. I know I'm in HC3, so I hear a lot about it, but you guys are really, more client facing with that and really live that experience. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that for our clients and prospects. We hope it's helpful. And you guys have a great day. And thank you for joining us.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
Tori.
much.